Hey everyone, Fearcrawler here. Welcome to the video. This video is the second part of my collab with TheDevilsInterval. The first video was done on his channel, and I'll link that in the description below. I'll also leave a link for his channel as well. I do hope you'll enjoy. About 10 years ago, the large cement factory in my city had closed. Around this time, the unemployment in my city was extremely high, and it was largely due to a lot of the businesses leaving. The factory itself sat vacant for a number of years, until another company purchased the property, and the entire site was fenced off. For about the first 6 months after the factory was purchased, there was armed security on the site. But like I said, the unemployment rate in my city was extremely high, and within a few months, even the security company had closed, and this meant that the site was no longer being watched. There was always something about old buildings that fascinated me. I especially took interest in abandoned factories. Normally when you think of factories, you think of a very noisy building with lots of machinery running 24/7. But there's something very eerie and kind of cool about an empty factory. One night, probably out of boredom, I grabbed a flashlight and a camera and decided I was going to sneak into the factory to take some photos. I snuck under the fence and hid by some concrete barricades. I took a few moments to peek around just in case the security company was still on site. But after a few moments, I realized that they truly weren't there anymore. At this point, I was feeling confident enough in myself to walk right up to the front door of the building and break one of the windows to climb in. The first thing I noticed when I got inside was just how dirty it was. As soon as I turned my mag light on, I could clearly see all the dust particles in the air. I was sort of kicking myself for not bringing a dust mask. After only a few minutes, I was starting to cough, so I did my best to pull my shirt up over my nose and mouth, hoping that this would block some of the dust from my lungs. I spent about the first 15 minutes inside just checking out the first floor. I snapped photos in random places of some of the machinery that was there, and honestly, the place was kind of cool. But even in the dead silence of that factory, something just wasn't feeling right. I had this sensation of being watched. I kind of played this off to just paranoia, or maybe an overactive imagination, or maybe that I knew what I was doing was wrong, and I was really just afraid of getting in trouble. After all, I was trespassing, and this is illegal. I hadn't planned to stay long, but I decided I wanted to check out the second floor before I left. It didn't take me long before I found a staircase leading up. There really wasn't much to see on the second floor. I found a foreman's office, and basically a large section of catwalks. I'm guessing that this most likely was set up so that you could see the factory floor from up high. Since the place had been abandoned for a while, I wasn't really sure of the structural integrity of the stairs, or the catwalks, so I took my time as I made my way through the building, walking extra slowly and trying not to shift my weight too much as I stepped. By this point in my exploration, I had already heard several strange noises inside the factory. They weren't really anything that I wasn't expecting to hear. A few banging noises, the sounds of stuff falling onto the floor, all things that could easily be explained as the building just starting to crumble. After all, it had gone several winters without heat, and this most likely was taking a toll on the concrete of the building, the irony of which was not lost on me. After a few more photos of the catwalk and the foreman's office, I started making my way back down the stairs. By the time I got about 3 steps from the final landing, I heard a shuffling noise coming from the ground floor. It was like the sound your foot would make if you twisted it inside gravel. That sort of scraping noise, like if you took a step and suddenly stopped. Again, I just kind of brushed these noises off. I figured it was nothing. By the time I was about 40 feet away from the front doors, and the window I had broken to get in, I heard someone cough behind me. I quickly spun around, and then I felt a fist land against my jaw. I fell onto the cement floor onto my stomach, with my mag light underneath me. I then felt a sharp kick to my ribs, and then a hand reaching inside my jacket. At this point, I realized it was someone trying to rob me. I had so much dust in my eyes from when I landed on the ground, I couldn't really see what was happening, but I did manage to blindly turn onto my back and swing my mag light up when I felt and heard it impact something, which I can only assume was the guy's face. This was followed by a scream, and what sounded like teeth hitting the ground. I managed to get myself back onto my feet and run towards the entrance. I planted my hand onto the windowsill and jumped out, inadvertently slicing my hand open on the glass. I ran towards the concrete blocks that were in front of the entrance, and I crouched down behind them trying to hide. When I peeked out, I could see someone climbing out the window. He looked a bit dazed, but he seemed very focused. He pulled a small flashlight out of his jacket, and he appeared to be looking at the ground at the blood trail I had left, and then he started following it. I watched for maybe another 4 or 5 seconds as 2 more people climbed out of the window after him. I did my very best to be quiet as I snuck back out underneath the fence, praying to God that they hadn't seen me. I got back home and started cleaning up my hand, and the following morning I had to go to the emergency room to get stitches. This was without a doubt the stupidest thing that I have ever done. All I got for my trouble were a few lousy pictures and a scar on my left hand.
I'm told this story by my mother and sister every single time we reminisce about our family cat, Fifi. Fifi lived to be 19 years old and passed 2 months after my parents separated and we moved out, leaving her with my dad. That was always one of my mother's regrets. The apartment we were moving into didn't allow cats, so she wholeheartedly feels responsible for Fifi getting sick and dying. Fifi was very close to us, my mother, big sister, and myself. Anyways, my mother says that I was maybe a year old. It was a very hot summer day. I was in Pampers lying on my parents' bed waiting to be fed, while my mother was in the kitchen preparing my milk. My older sister Jen was taking a shower. She's 7 years older than me. My mother recalls heading into the bedroom from the kitchen to pick me up when she was hit with the overwhelming feeling that she was being watched. We lived in an apartment building on the 3rd floor. She looked out of her bedroom window where the fire escape was, but didn't see anything, so she shook it off and proceeded into the living room, which is right in front of her bedroom door. Sitting on the couch, she yells out to my sister to hurry up and get out of the shower. My cat Fifi walks into her bedroom, and my mom doesn't pay much mind. She's just watching TV and feeding me. All of a sudden, my cat runs out of the bedroom, meowing, and her tail is very fat. This was alarming to my mother, because this only happened when Fifi saw a mouse, or when my dad would jump out and scare her. Curious, my mother stands up with me in her arms, baby bottle hanging out of my mouth, and slowly starts walking towards her bedroom. She's nervous, expecting a rat to come running out. She's bracing herself for the skeevy rodent. She looks in the room, which was lit by nothing but the streetlights outside, and to her surprise, a large man was halfway in the apartment, climbing in from the fire escape window. My mother let out a scream and ran to the bathroom with me dangling in her arms. She bursts through the bathroom door, grabs my sister's arm and yanks her out of the tub. She had to now run across the living room and into the kitchen, where the door leading to the hallway was. That means she has to pass her bedroom, with me in one arm and my naked sister in the other. She takes a deep breath and dashes across the living room, past the bedroom door, and felt something pull her hair as she raced to the kitchen, but she didn't look back. She tosses me to my sister and is scrambling to unlock and unchain the front door. The door opens and she bolts out running, screaming through the hallways, alarming all of the neighbors who came out to our aid and kept us inside their place while they called the police. When the police arrived, they went into our apartment, but said no one was inside. A week later, my house was robbed. A chain that was given to me by my godfather, who was killed a week after I was born, was stolen, along with other precious valuables, electronics, and toys. My mother always wondered who it was, and why they would have the balls to come back, and what were their real intentions. If Fifi never came out of the room with her tail fat, my mother would have been sitting on the couch feeding me, not knowing that a trespasser was crawling through our window. Thank you, Fifi, for the warning. You possibly saved our lives.
This happened when I was 13 years old. I had been staying out late at a friend's house playing video games. It was a Friday night, and since I didn't have school the next day, I really wasn't paying attention to the time. When I checked my cell phone, I saw several missed calls from my mom. It was at this point that I realized it was after 11 o'clock, and that I should have been home a long time ago. I sent my mom a quick text message telling her I was on my way. I grabbed a soda from my friend's refrigerator, said goodbye, and then headed out his front door. Normally I had no problem walking by myself. It's not like I was really afraid of anything. But since it was a Friday night, and a lot of people like to go out drinking, I really wanted to avoid any unnecessary encounters. So I figured the best way to do this was to take a few shortcuts. It probably wasn't the smartest idea I'd ever had, but I was in a hurry to get home. I knew I was already in trouble with my mom, and I didn't want to make it any worse. I don't know if you've ever played the video game Assassin's Creed, but that's the game my friend and I were playing before I left his house. In the game, the main character is capable of doing something called Freerunning. What this means is, anytime you get near an object, like a building or something like that, you have the ability to climb it to get past it. And like an idiot, I decided I wanted to give that a go. It certainly didn't look that hard in the game, so I figured why not give it a try. I finally found my opportunity when I saw a series of backyards all lined with fences. I got a running start and went for the first fence, which at most was probably about 4.5 feet high. I planted both my hands on the fence and leaped. I hit the ground kind of hard and unsuccessfully tried to roll out of it. Even though the landing did kind of hurt, I thought it was actually pretty fun, and foolishly I decided to go again. I ran for the second fence and did the same move, and again it turned out pretty much the same way the first jump did. At this point I was kind of congratulating myself. I honestly didn't think my friend was going to believe that I was doing this. I thought it would make a cool YouTube video if I filmed myself running and jumping, so I turned the flashlight on my phone, and I started recording as I jumped for the third fence. Again, I took a running start and leaped, but this time I had to try to do it with one hand while my other hand held my phone. Unfortunately, this didn't work, as my cell phone went flying out of my hand, and I ended up landing on my head. I landed in what looked like some sort of vegetable garden. It looked largely unkempt and was extremely high and full of weeds. I could see the faint glow of my cell phone's light underneath some shrubbery, so I slowly started to pick myself up and make my way towards it, when something that I saw made me stop dead in my tracks and crouch down low in a panic. I could see someone standing just a few feet away from me. The first thing I thought was that it was the homeowner, and that they were most likely going to call the police on me for trespassing, or maybe even destruction of private property if I had somehow damaged their fence. It was obvious the person had heard me, because I made a lot of noise when I landed. I wasn't sure if whoever this was could see me, but I was hopeful that they hadn't. I laid on my back and did my best not to make any noise. It was pretty dark out, and there wasn't a lot of lighting. But from where I was, I could see this individual walking over towards where my phone was. From the faint glow that was coming from the bushes, I could see that the figure was masculine, quite tall and extremely muscular, with a bit of a beer gut. I saw this guy reach down and pick up my phone. When the light of my phone illuminated his face, I could see that he was wearing some sort of a Halloween mask. It kind of looked like the Predator mask, but not exactly the same. I guess that's the best way I can describe it for you. What makes this even stranger is that this didn't happen on Halloween. Why was this guy standing outside wearing a mask like that? What was he doing? I was completely freaking out and trying to hold my breath, hoping that he couldn't hear me. I then hear him say something like,
"Did you want this back?" Just come over and take it. Take it from my hand.
I didn't care about my phone at that point. I bolted up out of the shrubbery and climbed back over the fence, leaving my phone behind. I ran as quickly as I could to get back home, and when I got inside the house, I locked the doors and explained to my mom what happened. We called the police and I explained everything to them. They didn't seem mad or anything, they just seemed more concerned. And the more I talked to them, the more it made sense to me why they were concerned. That phone had photos of me on it, photos of my friends, photos I had taken at school. I also had my Facebook and Snapchat on there, and my phone wasn't locked. It's been about a year since this happened, and it still freaks me out. I haven't had any bad experiences, but that doesn't do anything to ease the paranoia. Every time I go out somewhere with friends, I'm still terrified that that man in the mask is somewhere nearby.
This happened when I was about 12. Some context. I lived in a smallish country town. I'd grown up wandering the woods on one end of it, and I knew them very well. The main entrance to these woods is a small road about 5 minutes from the nearest residence, but there's another entrance at the back of a garden center, which is about a 15-minute walk from town, though it comes out onto private property. A girl my age had been murdered in the next city, but my town was safe. At least we thought so, but there was a murder 2 years later. Anyways, my friend and I decided to go for a walk in the woods, to go sit up on a cliff overlooking the town and sunbathe. It was a glorious sunny day. We were wearing shorts and tank tops as 12-year-old girls do, especially on hot days. As we walked down the road to the main entrance, we saw a van parked outside the gate, facing towards us. There were 2 guys inside, and as we approached, one of them rolled down the window and asked for directions. This being a quiet town in the late 90s, we politely directed them as best we could and carried on towards the entrance, about 300 yards away. As we got to the entrance, I felt that feeling you get when you're being watched. I turned around, and the van was still there, but I thought I could see the passenger watching us in the side mirror. As we looked, they both got out and started walking towards us fairly quickly, so we ran into the woods, which could have been stupid, but like I said, I knew these woods well. We ran and ran, blindly at first. I thought I heard them shouting to each other a few times. My friend suggested we head for the garden center, which was probably a good idea as the path forked, and it'd be harder to follow us if they didn't know which way we went. I don't think I've ever run so fast through the woods in my life. It couldn't have taken more than 5 minutes to reach the top of the hill behind the center. We climbed over the gate, which was locked, scrambled down the slope, and ran towards the main building. A guy came out and started to yell at us for trespassing, but I guess he noticed we were scared or something because he stopped and let us in. Before I went inside, I looked up and saw 2 men standing by the gate at the top of the hill. They had almost caught up with us. One of the workers there knew my dad, and I told her what had happened. She called the police, who sent someone to talk to us, and someone else to go find the van we'd seen, but it was gone. We gave descriptions of the guys, but as far as I know, they weren't seen again in town. Neither of us went back into those woods for a long time. I was 17 before I went near them again. I don't know what those men wanted, but they scared me a lot.